So with regard to the personal property taxes, the businesses that come to Guilford that have furniture, fixtures, and equipment, some of which is very specialized and therefore very expensive, can contribute a significant amount of revenue to the town without necessarily changing the character of the town. So I think the town, through its economic development coordinator and its economic development commission, and through its land use boards, need to be receptive to the types of businesses that may come to town to bring that type of revenue, because I think that's an area where we may be able to generate a significant amount of, that could be a significant resource for the town going forward. That's really all I had to say.
Thank you. I'd like to take the opportunity to say a couple words myself. First off, early on we heard some discussion about the elderly tax relief program here in town. That's $1.1 million of tax revenues that's spread amongst all of us. That's what enables our seniors to stay in this community, some seniors to stay in this community. We can argue the merits of the program. There will be some people who don't feel we need it. There are, I think, substantially more people who feel that elderly tax relief program is a program that rewards people for having lived in this community, having done things in this community, having contributed to this society, and it allows them to stay there. I, for one, would not want to see anybody take a look at the monies that we have allocated to the elderly tax freeze. In terms of efficiencies, yes, there was a task force that was convened several years ago, came up with some recommendations. They were just that, recommendations of areas to look at. One of the areas that has already been looked at is the combining the IT functions between the town, the police department, and the Board of Education. We had commissioned a study through our auditing firm, which has been finalized, and I know there are ongoing discussions currently between the Board of Education and the First Selectman's office relative to that particular program. I will say, however, that there may not be cost efficiencies out of that. The town has one full-time IT employee, all right? And by many accounts, we're woefully under-IT'd, if you will. If I could coin a phrase. I sent the First Selectman a spreadsheet the other day. Because of the age and the processing power of his desktop PC. No, not your age. Your computer technology. It took him 5 minutes to open up an Excel spreadsheet.
You're right.
So there may not always be efficiencies in terms of dollars and cents, but there may be efficiencies in terms of productivity by investing in information technology. I will also say that many years ago, this board, with the Board of Education and the Board of Selectmen, put in place a single finance director that covered both sides. Well, you want to know why that fell apart? Because of warfare between the then superintendent of schools and the First Selectman. They didn't trust each other. They didn't trust one person handling both sides. There are substantial issues. Joe was not in the position, and neither was Dr. Freeman, all right? So there are significant issues that need to be addressed. Can they be addressed? Yes, they can, all right? So some of that work has been done. That's the other point I want to get to. And I apologize at the last, for some of my remarks at the last hearing. I talked about context, and I was a little bit of preaching. However, I think it is important maybe to talk about that context again. And that is, as the First Selectman said, things have been moving along over time. How many employees, FTEs, are we down over the last 6-7 years?
11.
We have cut 11 full-time town employees over the last 7 years. On the Board of Education side, the budget that's being presented to you today has 9 teachers? 10?
6.6 teachers and 5 paraprofessionals.
How many total bodies?
Positions.
Positions. Exactly. That kind of work has been going on. There are other teaching positions that have been, and para positions that were eliminated over the years. They have been negated as a result of what? The bringing in district, the autism program, so we had to staff that. Had it not been for bringing that program in, there would be another half a dozen to 10 teaching positions that have been eliminated in this budget over the last 5 to 6 years. So that work has been done. But the reason that there isn't that difference is because we made a financial decision, financial-based and also education-based decision, to bring students in district, which by all accounts has turned out to be a very successful program. Back to the efficiencies for a moment. We're not going to be able to affect structural change, as Ken mentioned a minute ago. We're not going to affect structural change between tonight and tomorrow night. Not going to happen, and probably not going to happen between now and the time that the budgets get voted on. But I think if there's a commitment to working on them, I'd be happy to participate in those discussions. I'm seeing nods around the table, and I think uniformly that's something we can do. I want to talk a little bit about the surpluses. Surpluses come in two forms. One is revenue, and the second is underexpended allocations. All right? I believe we're looking at roughly about $500,000 in additional revenue over and above what we had projected. Some of that is related to some funds that we got from the state that we had not anticipated getting. All right? Some of it is as a result of the fact that we are not spending the full authorization that we had for the elderly tax freeze. Some of it is as a result of our assumed tax collection rate. We don't assume that we're going to collect 100% of the taxes. There isn't a community in this state that does that. There are some that budget at about 95%, particularly those with more commercial businesses, because they tend to go out of business they go out of business and leave them hanging. That is, I've asked the finance director, and I shared it with Joe, to take a look at and get us some numbers for tomorrow's consideration, what we could do with tweaking our tax collection rate, bringing it up a little bit so that it produces more tax revenue from the existing base prior to us levying a new mill rate. I want to talk for a minute about something, and I'll get to my idea on cuts. One of the areas that I want to explore, because this has been talked about before, the lights at Guilford High School field. I know it's in your capital. We don't want to cut capital, but is there an opportunity for us to use unexpended bond funds from previously approved bond items? And I see heads nodding around the table.
I thought they were supposed to look into that.
Bond counsel has said we could.
Bond counsel has said we can.
Yeah.
All right? So there's potentially $250,000 on the table right there. Well, we only have $250 in the budget. It may cost $360 eventually, but we're going to look to the bond funds for the overage anyway. So I think that's an area that we need to seriously consider taking a look at. I do want to make a comment, and my friend Sid Gale, who has the luxury of calling me a coward, or all of us a coward, if it fits, I will take some issue with that, because I think cowardice would not have been what this board did to offset the allegedly paltry cuts. We did the right thing by decreasing our anticipated revenues from the state of Connecticut. Because as you remember, most of you should remember, they did not have a budget agreement in Hartford. So we offset the $300,000 in cuts that we had, that we authorized, with a loss of $200,000 in revenue. So the net effect to the tax increase was $100,000 less. Shame on me, because I was the one that insisted, Joe will back this up, and I think Bill will as well, and some of the other board members, that we face the realities of what's going on in Hartford. Turns out we were pretty close. The net number was $252,000 less than what we thought the first time around. So, by cutting it by 200,000, we were only off by 52. Real cowardice would be not addressing that tomorrow night, because we know the state's not going to give us what we projected in the last budget. So we need to make an adjustment on the revenue from the state by $52,000. Otherwise, someone's going to accuse us of not doing the right thing. In terms of cuts, I'm in agreement. The voters have spoken, and we need to make some cuts. We need to make some cuts that are going to be somewhat painful. Well, are they really going to be that painful if we can take $250,000 from unexpended bond proceeds to cover a $250,000 cut on the Board of Education side? That's not as painful as it might have been. All right? There are areas on the town side, too, that we know we can go to. All right? And I know that there is a reluctance to touch public safety, but I think everything's on the table. But that's your decision. I agree with what Ken said earlier. You got elected to run the Board of the town. You guys got elected to do that. You should make the decisions on which line items you make the move on. I can't make that assessment for you.
Just give us the number.
Exactly. Okay. Question?
Matt,
Sir.
can I just clarify one thing?
Yep.
You did an excellent job on explaining the surplus
Yep.
of 1.5 million from the revenue side.
Right.
But I think we have to explain it. There's also another component being the expense side. Because we do budget,
Yes.
obviously, for expense. And I think we have to be clear about this. We had a very mild winter. I think we all agree to that. And we're grateful for that. But we don't budget for a mild winter. We budget, particularly in public works and engineering, for 14 or 15 storms. I don't remember the exact number. But we didn't have that many storms. So we have a surplus in engineering and public works. So that's funds saved, money that doesn't have to be expended in overtime and materials, that mean salt and sand. So that adds to the surplus for this year.
Right.
We don't have that every year. This is the first year I had it in 7 winters I've gone through. And I'm glad. So that adds to our surplus.
Right.
Also, we budget on the payroll side for every employee, every slot that's open or filled, every employee. We don't know who's going to retire during the course of this new budget year, but we have to provide for their salary. During the course of the budget year, we have retirements. And when someone retires, it's usually at a higher salary, then we replace them. Replace them at someone at a lower salary. That is a budget savings. And this year, we've had, I can't remember the number, but quite a few retirements in the police department. So there's quite a bit of savings there. I think I'm looking at almost 200,000 right there in the police department. But that's because of retirement at higher rates of pay than we're replacing them at. And that goes for all departments. So that sort of thing goes across the board. So it's just, call it good fortune or good budgeting, conservative budgeting, like I mentioned in the Moody's report. But we have to budget for those slots. I can't budget at a lower, I can't anticipate who's going to retire because they don't tell us. Those are just 2 aspects that lead to a surplus.
Thank you, Joe.
And now, one more thing. There have been years when we had deficits in these departments because of weather. And it had not been for FEMA reimbursement in the years that were mentioned, that we had these surpluses, we wouldn't have had surpluses, we would have had deficits. And also, in those years where we had these storms, we're just starting to collect revenue from FEMA that get added to this current year's surplus. That's another piece. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. I was actually I had notes to ask you about the other side of it, which I skipped over. I apologize. So, and I also wanted to mention that, 1.5 this year, 1.2 the previous year, Cindy, I think you said, and 1.3 prior to that. And Joe just
2005, 1.2, 2004, 1.3, this year,
and
1.5.
what Joe just mentioned was exactly the case. We budget, in typical budgeting, you'll do a rolling 3-year average on things that are unpredictable. It's a rather traditional trend, and I think that's what we have done in Public Works. The difference, as Joe just mentioned, is we got a lot of those expenditures covered because of the catastrophic storms and the fact that FEMA paid not only for, it basically paid salaries, the use of our equipment, and a bunch of other things. In the previous 15 years, I don't think we got any FEMA money, but we did 2 years in a row.
Now, FEMA, like you said, not only reimbursed for the salaries, but it'll
Equipment.
reimburse for my time.
Yeah.
Okay, even though I don't get any extra money. All right? It reimbursed for my vehicle.
Right.
It also reimbursed for the administrative time for the finance office.
Right.
And it reimbursed for the use of our equipment. Hours,
Right.
hours of time that we don't budget for.
There was one other point I wanted to make, and going to your side, and we may want to consider reducing what we use in contingency. Again, it's an art, the discussion is in the art form. We've used contingency over the years. Over the more recent past, we've used it to balance out accounts that are over expended in order for us to maintain, going forward, an appropriate level of spending in each department. So we have a clear record. It's an accounting mechanism, which could be adjusted. And by the way, now that we have grown our fund balance to a healthy percentage, if we have something that needs, unexpected expenses that rise during in the middle of the year that can't be covered by other department surpluses, then we go to fund balance, undesignated fund balance. So I think we have that opportunity. Ken, you wanted a question?
I have 2 questions now, and I'm going to restate the obvious, which is that if we, in fact, we have found authorized but unissued bond proceeds that are available, then we have just cut the Board of Ed budget by $250 without any reduction in service. And if we cut the 175 contingency line on the town side, again, now we're up to 425 without any reduction in service, and we haven't really done any work yet. Now, to me, it raises a couple of questions. First, you mentioned the number of town employees. I'm looking at the CAFR, which stands for Comprehensive Annual Financial Report, which our auditors presented to the Board of Finance 2 months ago for 2015, and it shows the number of town employees at 179, which is the highest it's been in the past 10 years, matched in 2010 with 179. So according to the CAFR, we still have 179, and it's the highest it's been in the past 10 years. Maybe that's wrong, but it shouldn't be wrong because it's our annual report.
I think that includes your park and rec people who are paid out of the park and rec funds, which are not part of the general fund.
On the heading, all it says is full-time government employees.
They're
by function,
full-time for the season.
The question on the lights, I think you have to take it a step farther. The question that I immediately get to when we talk about authorized but unissued paper is how much more of that is there and what specifically can we do with the monies. It shouldn't be a big secret. We should know what's available and how and when we can use it. And it should be part of our budgeting plan because we don't have to pay upfront for all of the equipment that we buy, especially the longer lives, like the lights on the pool. With respect to Dr. Freeman, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but I might a little bit. Early in the budget process, and Joe just talked about retirees, you mentioned that this was going to be a more difficult year cost-wise because we had fewer retirees than we've had in the past. Specifically, 4 was the number you gave out versus the 15 and 16, I think it was, in the prior 2 years. And since your budget has been submitted, correct me if I'm wrong, we've learned that we are now expecting an additional at least 7 more retirees. And I guess my question is, given that there seemed to be some, you implied early on that when we only had 4, that there would, in essence, be some increase in cost, meaning that with the additional 7, we should expect some decrease in cost. And my question is, are you able to quantify for us what those savings will be?
Yes, the 4 retirees were in last year's budget. We had 4 retirees last year that rolled over into this budget. As we prepared our budget and presented to you, we were only aware of 1 or 2 retirements that had come in. At this time, I believe we've recognized approximately 12 retirements. So in the same way that Mr. Mazza spoke about it, yes, there are opportunities for us to reduce our salary line, because as people retire out at the high end of the pay scale, we would look to replace those employees in most cases at lower steps of the pay scale. The difference for us on the school side is that that is mitigated depending on the departments in which, the certifications under which some of those people retire. For instance, areas of certification like special education, mathematics, science may be recognized as shortage areas. We may be challenged to find all of those employees the first step. We spoke to that when the first reductions were made. Yes, we will be able to recognize some salary reductions because of those retirements that we're now aware of.
So presumably you know where those retirements are, and so you should, Joe just threw out a number of 200, I think was the number he used a minute ago. Do you have a comparable savings for on the 7 that you're expecting to retire?
Yeah, we're preparing those numbers, but I haven't had an opportunity to discuss them with the Board of Education yet. But yes, there will be savings that can be recognized.
So again, it looks like we could potentially pick up 200 here and another 200 there, which is another 400, so we're up to 825. Again, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it's without any reduction in service. So our music programs and our beaches and our library passes and our parades are all still good to go.
Correct. That would not impact staffing levels at the schools.
That's all I have for now.
Good. Yeah. Are there any other questions? Mike?
I actually have 2 comments. Lou actually opened up to the same page I did, but so I don't know if you had the same question. The one thing I wanted to mention is Mr. McKenzie talked about the $250,000 coming out of capital, which is, we could cut that right out. I just wanted, something we need to consider is that that 250 replaced $250,000 worth of other capital projects.
Correct.
So we have to make a decision it's great that we could put it in a bond. The question is, do we cut capital $250,000 and have to make it up again next year? That's one of the issues. I don't know if that was.
It's almost exactly the point I was going to make, which is it's all well and good in this 1 year to use this one-time expenditure to solve this problem that we're faced with. We've been working for years to get these capital line items to a figure where routine maintenance can be covered out of these expenses, and now there's going to be $250,000 to be made up over the next few years. So every decision, not the lecture, has a consequence, and the consequence will be in subsequent years, capital is going to be behind, and there's going to be a little bit of a scramble to get there. So it solves the problem, and everybody, I think, is probably prepared to go there this year, but it creates another problem. There's no free passes. There's no fat plums sitting out there waiting to be plucked.
And our capital budget, was set, we have plenty of projects that we had on the list. The lights came up in the spring, like when it was too late to really look at bonding them. And there's also the question of, the lights are used a lot by the town, the other sports teams that are not, school related. But it was a safety issue. There was a concern that they were rotten enough that they were going to fall down, so we couldn't get to bonding. But that's exactly right, that if just because we get $250,000 back that was a surprise this spring doesn't mean that, those capital items that we had budgeted for a year ago as part of our operating budget to repair the pointing on the bricks and all these things goes away.
Two other points too, if I can jump in on that, which are, the money is approved, but has not been spent yet. That money will then go out to bond. That will, albeit it's only $250,000, but that'll become a bond, and that's going to change the capital, I mean, the principal and interest bond. I don't need to tell you that. I mean, you know, once it gets bonded, there's a long term, and you do that too many times, the nickels start to add up. Anyway, it's maybe it's a necessary thing, but it's not a free pass.
That's the.
Oh, I know what it is, sorry.
Go ahead.
Sorry, we're getting late. He also included the entire $175,000. I'm pretty sure you would be on an island of one on that one. I mean, the fact that we would consider cutting contingency to a certain extent, and that might be a good idea, probably doesn't mean it's going to go to zero. So your 800,000 starts to erode. That's all I'm saying.
I think we can do a lot more than anything.
That's a purview of the Board of Selectmen. I will point out that the Board of Education does not have a contingency account in their budget.
No, and just to let you know, for example, last year we had to hire a kindergarten teacher after the budget was approved because notwithstanding our very careful, thoughtful, detailed enrollment projection that called for 160 kids enrolling in kindergarten last year. In fact, we had about 210 in that area. Guess what's happening this year? We project, our demographer projected, I think it's 167 enrolling in kindergarten this fall. Today we have 178. At this time last year we had 178 and it turned into over 200. So there is we don't have a contingency line. We have to be creative, but the fact is our enrollment is going back up, at least in the lower levels in kindergarten.
Mike.
If I could just finish, a couple, thanks. One comment, I don't necessarily want to compare us to our neighbors to the east, but I will. I don't know if you followed it, they had their referendum yesterday. They had, and I'm not bringing up percentages or anything like that. What I want to bring up is they had their own issue that we didn't have to deal with. And if I read it correctly, they had to deal with a cut from the state of something along the lines of 1.1 million.
Yeah.
We got cut, we were slated for a number pretty close to that. And because of our representative and our senator, they brought that number down to the numbers that the chairman brought up, which were minuscule compared to almost $1 million. I want to give kudos to them as well for doing that because Madison didn't have to deal with the high school. They dealt with that many years ago. They had to deal with a huge cut in revenue and had to make that up. And they were at basically a tax increase that was very similar to where we are. The one question I have, and there were there's a lot of comments and questions I had collected about efficiencies, and I think we're all at these tables saying that we are going to look at those reductions, looking at efficiencies. I think that's fair to say that we're in agreement there. The one question I did want to come up to mention is about the teacher contracts that are looming over the summer. One of the questions is we've got Board of Ed and volunteers that are involved in those negotiations, and a comment that came up was about contracting out legal services or outside consultants who are professionals to do that for us. And I'm just asking that question on behalf of the public that came to my attention and see if that's...
Yes. Mr. Kazin and I, along with attorney Ken Weinstock on behalf of the board, have engaged in preliminary meetings relating to the teachers' contract. Mr. Weinstock's practice is labor management relations and specifically specializing in public sector union negotiations from the management side. We have a very high degree of confidence in his assistance and also Mr. Kazin has more than a little bit of experience in negotiations as well, and so to that extent we do have an outside consultant and we have a very high degree of confidence in him.
Can I ask a question, and maybe there's some folks in the room that don't understand? These kind of negotiations aren't typical negotiations, and negotiation is somewhat of an odd word because because of binding arbitration.
Yeah, I haven't heard that many comments on this, but I've heard some people say, well, why can't you, Board of Education, be tougher or take a stronger stand on bargaining unit contracts. And the fact is, we have in many, many areas. We have now I think as Mr. Mazza said earlier, that the town is phasing out the defined benefit pension plans. We've already phased, they're gone. Teachers don't have a pension with the town of Guilford. The teacher pension is supposed to be paid by the state. And I think it's ironic that the state of Connecticut is supposed to be our financial model at this point. I mean, I guess the other fact I'd like to know the answer to is what the state's expense increase has been over the last 10 years. It's great that they had a zero budget this year. I wonder what it's been over the last 10 years. I guarantee it's higher than what ours has been, but in any event. Teachers do not have the right to strike. Let's say teachers, we'll just use them as an example. All of the public sector unions, they do not have a right to strike. In exchange for having the right to strike taken away from them, and we don't have a right to lock them out either. That's the other side of that coin. Not that you would want to lock them out. That's a horrible way to run a town, but in any event, they don't have a right to strike. In exchange for having the right to strike taken away from them, they have what is called a binding arbitration, and that is a process where a Board of Education and a union choose an arbitrator each choose arbitrators who then choose a neutral arbitrator, and effectively the neutral arbitrator decides what the new contract is going to be if the parties can't come to an agreement. The law builds in an incentive or a disincentive to both unions and management to be reasonable, and that is the arbitrators are compelled to accept the last offer of one party or the other party. In other words, they cannot split the difference. So if we go in with a position that is just maybe politically popular, but is unreasonable from an economic point of view with where we are in contracts in the state of Connecticut, the arbitrators have no choice. Or they would not have a difficult choice, I guess, let's put it that way. They would choose the other side. Similarly, it goes the other way too. The union has a disincentive to being unreasonable because because if they are, then they could choose ours. The arbitrator would choose our best proposal. What that means as a practical matter is the range of contracts in this area is not like this. It's like this. And so we don't have as much power as you might have in the private sector. On the other hand, neither do the unions. We do believe that some of the issues that we're going to be looking at are going to be moving. Most of the bargaining units that we've come to an agreement with over the last several years are all now in HSAs, health savings account plans, as opposed to the old indemnity plans. We certainly intend to continue to move in that direction as best we can, and that results in some substantial savings to the town, and it's just a better way to run a health plan. So it is a very different model, and it has some substantial limitations that affect the end result.
And Mr. Boss, if I could just follow up with a question for you. My understanding is that when the arbitrators are looking at the positions of labor and management, when determining what a reasonable position would be, is that they look at what comparable towns are paying their employees.
Right.
So if we adopt a position that's far removed from what other towns similar to Guilford are paying their employees, the arbitrator's not likely to agree with our position. They're going to look at what other towns are doing and say,
yeah, one thing, I obviously from a generic point of view, you're right. The last thing I really want to do here tonight is start talking about what arbitrators might or might not find compelling, because then it will have an exhibit sticker being passed around, at the arbitration hearing, which I really don't.
but their point of reference is what other towns are paying.
That's a point of reference, certainly. And we are quite aware of what other towns are paying. And it's you have to take everything into account. It's not just salary, but it's salary, benefits, and so forth. So,
a good point to be made there is comparable towns, based on the reports you gave us earlier this evening, are New Canaan, Darien, Westport. They're among the
comparable towns.
I mean, look, that's Fairfield County. There's a different labor market in Fairfield County. See, I'm going to argue the other side of it now, right? Because I don't consider them comparable. I consider our performance comparable to them, but that's a different labor market and a different economic market.
Any other questions from the board?
I just wanted to make a follow-up comment to some of the comments have been said. I've served for 11 years elected official, and I think one of the things that the public is looking for is a change in the way that we operate. This is the first time in 11 years, except for the school issue, that we've collectively gotten all together. So I applaud you for getting us together. I think that's great. I think we need to do that because the public doesn't see us necessarily. I mean, they vote one budget. So I think part of what I said earlier is that we should be working together. And again, I urge us to get a committee afterwards, start working on some of these things. Because that's how the public, the perception is important and the reality of how we operate. So if we're going to accomplish some of these things that aren't going to touch the customers, the positions, then we have to do it together because we can't do it. And I understand there might be historically issues in the past, but that doesn't mean you don't sit down today and see if they can be addressed, including facilities and finance, just to name a few. So I'm hoping that part of this, coming out of this, will be that we will do just that.
Thank you. Any other questions? Any other comments? Final comments? Hearing none. Thank you very much for everyone's participation.
Do you have one more round of public input?
Yeah, oh yeah. Thank you. Thank you for that reminder. Public forum? Anyone?
Sure, it looks like you're heading for
No.
the gate.
I've got some questions I would like to ask. I also want to make a comment about how disappointed I am with the turnout here tonight. I'm just a citizen. I do participate. I'm on the Planning and Zoning Commission, but I heard a lot of anger about this budget. And here you have all these people here that you can influence one way or the other. And this is for the people that are maybe watching this on video. You got to be here. What do we got here? 50 people maybe now? Out of what, 22,000 people in town? It's not right. You shouldn't be criticizing anybody on any commission if you're not willing to participate in democracy. And democracy is you should be here. Having said that, I've been hearing a lot about the fact that our teachers are basically their health care that they have now is a Cadillac plan. And I don't know if that's true or not, but I believe it is. If it is, I understand that if they stay on a Cadillac plan, that there is a fairly, I think in 2017, there's a fairly steep financial penalty.
No, it's going to push to
2020.
It's 2020, and we're quite optimistic that we're going to have some structural changes implemented before 2020.
Okay.
We're quite aware of that issue, and the current plan is really actually very much in line with what has historically been the situation in comparable districts, but we are moving toward health savings accounts with very significant structural changes. We've already implemented those for other bargaining units, and that, again, I don't want to bargain the contract here tonight, but we are quite aware of that issue and are optimistic that we'll be able to move forward on that.
Okay, thank you very much. That's great, and that's good news.
Yeah, no, it's terrific. No, there was originally 2018, I think, was going to be the date, and then Congress pushed it back a couple of years, but we think we'll be out from under it before then anyway.
My next question is also for the Board of Education. I know there are different bargaining agreements. So my question is this, is I would like to know the average increase in salary and benefits, not individually, but on a gross level for administrators on a percentage basis versus the people that are teaching.
A little, I don't have the contracts with me tonight. Do you remember the administrator's number, Ms. Trudell?
They're very similar.
Yeah, and they're really two different issues. They're quite similar, but with teachers, there are two really classes of teachers, if you will, or levels of teachers. Teachers who are at top step really get a cost of living increase that I don't remember the number in this particular year's contract, but it's not very high. I think it's less than 2% or 10.5%. If you shoot me an email, I'm sorry?
It's about one.
About 1.5.
Well, I guess I'm only asking as part of participating as a public, and I think it would be nice to know, because sometimes what I hear is I think the teachers think they deserve more because they think the administration is getting more on a percentage basis.
Oh. I mean, I guess the percentage, the number is very close in terms of what the increase was. Administrators are paid more than teachers, obviously. But the percentage increase is for top step teacher and administrators, quite close.
Okay, good. My next question is, I saw an article in the newspaper saying that we were committed to spending the $950,000 on a new field at the school. And then the following week, I heard that it was going out they were going to put an RFP together and send it out for bids. I guess my first question is are we actually obligated in some way to spend the $950,000?
Are we the town? No.
The town.
No, and that is not part of this. There's one thing I think is unfortunate, that I think there's some people that believe that this is an issue that is in this budget that the Board of Finance is looking at, and that's not the case. The additional field at the high school is part of the high school building committee project, and it's part of their the bond appropriation if they choose to do it, but they don't have to do it. They don't have to do anything.
And then that money cannot come
But
back.
that money could not be used for the budget.
And some portion of that money is being spent. The $900,000 figure refers to the total cost of an artificial turf field system. If the artificial turf field system is not put in place, a natural grass field would be put in place, and there is a cost associated with that. So we couldn't not finish that space. So some of those dollars will be spent. It wouldn't be a full $900,000 if it's natural grass rather than artificial turf.
Let me, as the Board of Ed representative to the Standing Fields Committee, I can make this a little more clear. When we built the high school, we had to destroy one of the fields in order to have the room to build the high school. So we're down a field. We've got to replace that field. Now, whether we replace it with an artificial turf field or with a natural grass field, we're going to spend somewhere in excess of $550,000 up front either way. The difference is if we do the artificial turf field, we're going to spend $950,000 up front, and we're going to have relatively minimal maintenance costs for the first 10 years. If we do the grass field, we spend $550,000, but we have very substantial maintenance costs on the grass field going forward. And so when we looked at it over the 10 to 12 year life of the field, it turned out to be a wash. So it's a question of, do you want to invest the capital so that you have less in the operating budget, or do you want to say, okay, I don't want to spend the money now, but I know I have to spend big money down the road? That's a decision that the building committee, the high school building committee, has got to make. But one way or the other, we have to have another field. I mean, if you look at the complex out there at the high school, when we moved all the pieces around to build the high school next to the existing high school, we destroyed a field. We have to have it back.
But we don't have to spend, to answer your question, we don't have to spend $950,000 to put a field, and that's why, and that money could go back, and was not specifically in this budget, it would then go back and save on.
But it would just affect the bond.
Right, the bond,
Future budgets, which.
Not this actual.
I'm not here to argue the benefits of artificial turf over grass.
Well,
I'm here to ask the question, do we really need to spend the $950,000? That's what I'm here for.
Well, the Standing Field Committee believes quite strongly
that the artificial turf field will have significantly greater available time to play on it. If we go with the grass field, some of the existing extracurricular athletic programs are going to have to get cut back because we just won't have field time. I mean, on a grass field, when it gets wet, you can't play on it or you'll destroy the field. With an artificial turf field, you can play on it if it's raining. It doesn't matter. In the RFP, they have asked for bids on various types of artificial turf fields. I mean, there's a lot of controversy about one kind of infill, another kind of infill. And so they're examining 3 options. And I think that that's something for the standing fields and the high school building committee to decide what's best, if they decide to go that route. If they think that, having looked at all this, that it's just too expensive, then maybe they'll go with the grass field. I don't know.
Mike, you're as our liaison to...
Could I take 10 seconds to just, I just want to make sure I get this clear. Back to the numbers. We're talking about a net difference between natural turf, natural grass, and artificial turf of about $400,000. Is that the understanding? It's a net difference. We're going to put a field in anyway. We were always going to put a field in to replace it. There was no question there.
I'm not against putting the field in. I don't know what you're asking the question for, because I'm not against it. I'm just trying to understand what the impact is.
I'm not addressing the for or against either. I'm saying what the cost differential is. That's all I'm doing. For the record, is stating that everyone's talking about a $950,000 expenditure. It's really a $400,000 net expenditure to go to a different surface. I want to keep the numbers in line here. We're talking about numbers. Whether you're for or against it, that's up to the Guilford High School Building Committee. Period.
Well, and along that line is, what I heard again tonight is that when the school decided to bring, I guess what I would call special ed programs back into the high school, that were being, where students were being shipped to other schools because we couldn't do the job, that we spent a considerable amount of money doing that. And one of the things I heard over and over again was that this was going to save us money over time. And I have never seen one document, one piece of evidence as to whether it has saved us money or not saved us money.
You can give Dr. Freeman your email tonight. He will send it to you first thing in the morning.
I have one here. It was part of a budget presentation the Board of Education made to the Board of Finance this year.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how does the public, but I guess my question is, how does the public, where does this...
Well, sir, I have to comment again, is what Dr. Balistraci said earlier. All of the Board of Education meetings are open to the public. They are also televised. And that we went over savings in the special ed tuition line on multiple occasions for the last 3 years. It's been on the agenda, it's been on television, it's been in our minutes. So if any citizen wanted to know, it's there. Also, all 9 of us, plus Dr. Friedman, are available at any time via phone, email, any way you'd like to ask those kind of questions, and we'll answer them. We're here to serve the public, and it's not a secret. We have saved money.
I'm also going to say, this was presented to the Board of Finance not once, but twice, at public meetings. The first was at our February meeting where we received the budgets from both organizations. And then at our, at the town, at the annual budget meeting that we host, it was presented again, and it was a PowerPoint presentation. As I remember, Dr. Freeman had a little trouble getting his program to work, but it was part of both of those presentations. It was on GCTV in both occasions. So, yes, the information is there, and it's also on the Board of Education website. I don't know how we get it to more people, and I'd love to hear your suggestions at some other point, but tonight is not the night.
It's obviously, for example, you talk about GCTV, I have DirecTV. So, and there's a lot of people that have Dish or something. And I guess what I'm getting to is how we communicate is part of, I think, the issue here. And I think the Board of Education does a good job. I know they send out emails occasionally, Was this ever discussed in any of the emails or the stuff that was on the website? Because I do look at it occasionally, and I just missed it.
The budget information?
No, specifically the savings.
Yes, it's on the website. I looked at it today.
It was on the website until the referendum date
Right.
was set, at which
Yeah.
point
We can't,
we
you
had
know,
to remove it from the
actually, that's a
website.
really interesting point. By state law, we cannot put on our website information that might be perceived as advocating a yes vote. How about that? A yes vote. Right? Right, it's a violation of law. If I put this presentation up on our website, he'd be fined, or I'd be fined. And I guess I'd rather he be fined than me be fined, but it's illegal for us to put that on our website.
It's also illegal for us, you know, for people to vote, regardless of which side. We can't tell people to vote using our systems, you know, that have been paid for by taxpayer money.
Well, that was another thing at first, because I've heard, and it's only a rumor, but I've heard that children were instructed, specifically instructed at school to go home and tell their parents to vote for the budget.
That's inaccurate.
That's not
That is
true.
inaccurate.
Okay. Just for the record, I want to know that's inaccurate.
That kind of accusation, I don't think even deserves a response.
Well, it's not that, he's just reporting something, that's fine. You know, it is not true.
Yeah, it's not coming, I just want to let you know for sure that it's not coming from me. It's not, but I've heard it.
You know, one of the things I think we all understand very clearly in these days of rapid communication is not everything you read, not everything you hear is true, and that's one of them.
So right here, we just cleared it up.
Yeah, absolutely, happy to.
I have a question about the student numbers, because I saw a report that I think was actually a published report, and it may have been a study done by someone outside the school system that talked about school populations. And I think one of the things that I was surprised by is we're here talking about how many kids we've actually lost, and there are different numbers coming around. But that report talked about probably 400 less students, but at the same time, our staff rose by 40 people.
Well, that's not true either, but I'll be glad to walk through the whole thing. Our student, I'm going to go by our state enrollment reports, because these are the reports that we file with Hartford. They're available on our website. Our student enrollment, counting outplacements for whom we're responsible, in 2005 was 3898. In 2006 was 3833. In 2007 was 3880. In 2008 was 3824. 2009, 3770. 2010, 3741. 2011, 3719. 2012, 3638. 2013, 3655. 2014, 3472, 2015, 3461. The projection next year, we don't know. But that's the extent of our enrollment issues. Just to talk about what staff has been, if you look at, I've got data with me for full-time equivalent certified staff. Now that's teachers and other certified staff, not administrators, but it would include psychologists, social workers. So they're not all classroom teachers. In 2009-10, we had 342 certified staff for, I'm going to call it 3,712 students. But remember, 260 of those students we were only teaching for a half a day, because we had half-day kindergarten at the time. So really, you have to subtract out half of that if you want to count full-time students for certified staff. In 2009, we had 10.4 students per certified staff. Today, we have 9.8 students for certified staff, so it's gone down. Why? Three really easy reasons. One is in 2014, we added 7 kindergarten teachers to go to full-day kindergarten. Second, we did the in-house, the special ed program, which does, yes, we hired certified staff, but we then didn't write big checks to outside service providers. So, and that was, anybody who's been watching our meetings for the last 10 years knows that that was intolerable, the situation with outplacements. And where we are now is that we've actually saved money, but actually done a better job delivering the product. The special education consumers, the parents, are extraordinarily happy about that. And then the third thing we did is, rather than use outside professional development, we went to a model of using literacy coaches, certified staff, to actually model teaching techniques for teachers in the classroom. So we hired 7 of those, I think. So that's 22 between full-day kindergarten, the special ed, and the literacy coaches. If you back those out, because we didn't have anything like that in 2009. What was a 10.4 student per certified staff equivalent in 2009 is 10.5 today. So it's close. And the difference is because of full-day kindergarten, special ed in-house, and the literacy coaches.
Good, thank you. So what are the numbers going forward?
Well, funny you ask. We did get a demographic study, and actually, Dr. Freeman, we should put the new demographic study up on the website. I don't think it is. I think the old one is on the website. The new one I don't think is.
No, the new one to 2024 is available.
It is? Okay, great.
The new study up to 2024 is available on our website.
The last study that we did back in 2004 it came out almost to the person accurate. The new one, which was done by with the same technique and same level of trustworthiness, unfortunately, 2 years into it, it's already wrong. And it's wrong at a grade that affects us moving forward for the next 13 years, and specifically kindergarten. They predicted that we were going to have 206 children in kindergarten last year. We had more. They've predicted this year 167, that we were going to drop to 167. We're already at 178 in May, and I think it's quite likely we're going to be over 200. So that projection is going to be off, we think, and that's going to carry forward probably for 13 years. So what they are predicting for next year or for this year, current year was 3291. That's already wrong. They're predicting for next year 3213. That's almost certainly going to be wrong. So we don't know. We may have to go back out again. I think when they did this study 2 years ago, they did say, look, there are 2 things that may change things. One is full-day kindergarten. Is that going to lead to more people, younger people, buying houses here? Because the parents wanted full-day kindergarten. You know, they would choose a town, Madison, instead of Guilford, because Madison had full-day kindergarten. It's a big deal to some people. And so that may have affected the projections moving forward. The other thing is the high school. And they said that in the study, is the difference between the old building, which was driving consumers, people choosing to live here away, is that going to change now because of the new high school? And I think I'd argue there's a third variable that they didn't account for, and that is just the general improvement in the district over the last 5 to 10 years, whatever range you want to count it. So I don't know. We may have to go out again, frankly.
Okay, so if the projections were right that were originally done, and it looks like they may not be, I think it suggested that we were going to lose about another 400 students by 2024?
Correct. If they are accurate, we will continue to see declining enrollment over the next 8 to 10 years.
That's a Connecticut demographic.
Correct.
Yeah.
Every town is losing students? Yeah. So,
except us. In the last 2 years, in the last 2 years, we really haven't. Last year, we were projected to lose 100, and we only declined by 11 students.
This projection, a year into it, said that we were going to be at 3291. We're actually at 3461.
okay, good. I think I had one more. I guess I now understand that the surplus, the amount that was going to go into the rainy day fund is actually in the budget now.
There is no amount. We don't budget for rainy day fund.
So how do you know that the last couple of years you've put a lot of money into that fund?
That's only the surplus.
The surplus. So I guess my question is, Aren't we really planning on having a surplus this year?
We never plan on a surplus. Surplus is the result of the actual versus budget. We don't know that till the end of the year.
But we're projecting a budget of surplus. According to the finance director, they're projecting a surplus. For this year, not next year. Not next year, for the current year.
We're 10 months through, so it appears that there will be a surplus, but something, I guess, could happen negatively.
But not for the budget we're talking about tonight.
Not for the budget we're talking about.
We never budget for that.
Okay, that's it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ted?
So I just want to confirm a point that Mr. Bloss had made regarding the literacy coaches. We now have 7 of those positions in district, is that correct?
I believe 8.
We have 8. And what is the overall cost of that program at this time?
8 certified teachers.
And
I don't
presumably,
know what step they're at.
well, presumably the qualifications for that job is they were master teachers, right? They had typically been teaching for 15 to 18 years and really had some high level of skills.
Those are essentially teachers at master's level at the top step, correct? $88,000 a piece.
And do they actively teach classrooms of children at this time?
They model teaching to other teachers. They are not teachers they do not teach.
They don't have a class.
Responsible for teaching students.
They do not deliver direct classroom instruction. They are professional developers on staff to specifically support the teachers in their schools to help each of those teachers improve their performance.
Right. So I guess the question is, in the business world, sometimes we bring in consultants. They're with our company for a year or two. We get everything out of them that we can, and then we move on to a new model or a new program. The literacy coaches that we have now have been here since Dr. Frisella had sort of initiated the program, so they've been in district 8-10 years at this point.
I'm not sure it's been 10. I think it's been closer to 8, but I'd have to.
Right. So one of the thoughts is, as we are looking for non-reduction in services of ways of reducing spending and actually perhaps even increasing services, is what is the concept or what is the thought of having those 8 master teachers actually be back in a classroom next year, so that instead of their going into other people's classrooms, teachers can go in and watch them teach their own class, so that they can actually have a class to teach, and we can get the benefit of having 8 master teachers teach our kids in the district for a year.
The model's not built solely on them modeling. They don't simply model instruction for the teachers. They actually work with teachers collaboratively to help those teachers learn how to plan and design their lessons better. They will go in and observe teachers working in the classroom to give direct and specific feedback to those teachers on how they are teaching in the classroom, and it works in a reciprocal process so that every teacher is working with his or her coach on exactly the teaching techniques in the areas where they need to grow professionally. In fact, it is the model that the state of Connecticut has put forward in all of the new teacher supervision and evaluation plans. Professional development for teachers needs to be specific, it needs to refer to them and their students directly, and it needs to be embedded in their daily work.
I understand. In my time, when I was on the Board of Ed and when this program was being discussed, we were talking about the salary level of elementary school principals, because that's where the program was introduced. And we talked about all the things that we wanted an elementary principal to do, and that this specific function that you're talking about right now, because we used to refer to principals as the principal teacher. They were, in fact, the master teacher in the building and performed that function. And through bureaucracy and everything else, we've layered so much on those people that they now aren't able to perform that function to the level that we'd like. And so we've brought in yet another person to focus on that area. And so one of the things that happens in business on occasion is if you are replacing the function of a person in a building because they can't get it all done, then the next question is, if we've taken that responsibility off of the building principals, is it possible, if the building principal at that level is becoming more administrative and less evaluative and less teaching, that the salary structure for our actual principals might be adjusted accordingly, so that we've taken that workload off of them that we used to ask them to do.
No, because I would disagree with the characterization. And again, going back to the new teacher supervision and evaluation plan, in the last 4 years, our principals are more directly involved in instruction than they have been in years. The new expectations for principals to conduct observations and evaluations of every teacher every year are far different than they were 5 years ago, where principals were perhaps supervising and evaluating 1/3 of their staff every year. The principal and the coach in a building work in partnership to support the teachers, one in an accountable and evaluative process, and another one in a professional development and supportive process, so that you have one who is responsible for evaluating that teacher and deciding whether that teacher continues in employment, and another one who offers a safe coaching relationship where that teacher can go and be vulnerable and find ways to be better. And it becomes a very powerful partnership with those two people helping our teachers to be as effective as possible. The Board of Education just this week had a presentation about the instructional practices that we're engaging in all of our classrooms, but specifically this week around mathematics instruction. And when we expect our teachers to be able to differentiate instruction and meet the needs of all learners, they need that kind of support if they're going to teach at that kind of level. It's not a simple instructional approach that we embrace here in the Guilford schools.
But it is a good question. I mean, embedded professional development is something we really tried to model, and there is some cost savings to that rather than send people out. It's been one of the initiatives we've sought to move the district forward in terms of instruction, but it's also something we probably have to evaluate, as we,
Is it possible that someday we're going to reach a point of diminishing returns on that? And absolutely, sure. Of course. I don't think we're there yet, and I certainly don't think we're there 2 years after implementing Common Core and 2 years after implementing the new state teacher evaluation program with our local amendments to it. So,
and on the heels of more than 60 retirements and rehires, we've got a changing workforce, we've got new standards and new expectations, correct?
And I'd like to suggest that the state accountability rankings that places us 6th in the state, I think the embedded professional development, it is not a coincidence that is part of it.
I believe it's one of the best investments this board has made.
The facilities budget of the Board of Ed for maintenance, what is that dollar value now as a part of their budget?
I'm sorry, maintenance?
How much have we set aside for maintenance, and how much have we set aside for capital projects in the operating budget for the Board of Ed?
Site improvement line is slightly over $500,000.
Is that what you're asking?
Yeah.
Okay.
So the reason I asked that question is, as a former board member, it was my experience and witnessing how that money was authorized, that money would sit for an entire year. And in June, if we hadn't transferred all the money out of it, then we would hustle up and we would do some facility maintenance projects over the summer. And it, in fact, was the contingency fund for the Board of Ed. And part of the reason we know that was true is we looked at how facilities were managed through the 90s and through up until about 2005. And part of the reason our high school looked like the way it did prior to its replacement, and some of our elementary schools and middle schools were in rough shape, is because that's how we manage the town's money. There are other towns who do it differently. The maintenance funding is all on the town side, and their schools look like our police department, they look like our fire department, they look like our town hall. Their schools are immaculate. And that's because the money that's set aside to maintain those facilities actually gets spent on those facilities and those projects. It isn't at the discretion of the Board of Ed to transfer the money out of the line item and use it for whatever else is a more pressing issue that year.
What town does that?
Your neighbor to the east, Madison, as an example.
I'm not sure that's consistent with state law, because under the general statutes, the Board of Education has a responsibility for maintaining school buildings.
Well, take a look.
Okay.
They have some pretty nice looking schools over there. They don't seem to have that issue. So my suggestion to you tonight, as part of also the concept of combining the facilities management on both the town and the Board of Ed side, is that that is an area for savings, and that also we might actually have better looking schools and better maintained schools if we put that money aside so it actually gets utilized for what it was intended for.
Well, you've looked at the way we've spent that line in the last 5 years, I'm sure. Would you agree that we've been using it on maintaining buildings?
You've had a closer look at it than I have. I have a historical perspective on it.
I mean, we certainly have spent that money on.
That's why I understand that.
And that was one of the things that this board and, my time here, I guess, 6 years, 7 years, been really focusing on that, is making sure that we are maintaining and increasing the capital line.
So we're going to meet again tomorrow night, right?
Yeah.
So why don't we get the historical data on the transfers out of facilities and all the other places it's gone, because it's in the minutes, it's in the record. And we'll just see how much money gets moved and how much of it stays home for what it was intended for. Mr. Ailes was talking about the ease of which the folks in Madison have passed their budget yesterday. Is that correct?
Yes.
Right. And one of the interesting things about Madison is that their budget was $14 million less than the proposed budget that Guilford has looked at in the past referendum. And there's some savings on the Board of Ed side, there's some savings on the town side. It's a significantly less sized budget, if you will. The student population, I think, is only a difference of around 200 to 300 students. And the town populations are really quite similar. So it's just a thought, and when we're doing all the comparisons tonight of maybe we could take a look there and see where there are some of the ideas that they've been able to produce their town government at a $14 million savings.
Well, their per student cost is identical to ours. So
it must all be on the town side, is what
I
you're
don't
saying.
know. I'm not, it's, the one neutral principle I think there is in looking at different town budgets is if there's something that's an outlier, then there's a fact we don't know. They handle bonding a different way, they handle their debt service a different way, for a long time, they handled their health insurance below the line. I don't know. I just do not think that
It's
they're...
a total number. That's what you guys are talking about tonight.
I will be happy to look at their budget, except they don't have their, well, whatever, it doesn't matter.
The town of Madison has, the citizens voted on two budgets. One is the Board of Ed and the other is the town. They are separate.
That is true. We could do that too. But their cumulative budget is $14 million less than Guilford's right now.
They have about 4,000 less people.
There you go.
4,000 less population.
My last question is, who does the finance director report to?
First elected.
And in my time serving on the Board of Ed, if I was ever at a meeting like this, and including tonight where we have a Board of Ed finance person here, I'd have a hard time imagining that we would have a meeting like this and the finance director would not be there to answer and resolve the issues. I just find that curious as to how we organize ourselves to do that.
I believe the finance director is on a vacation, a pre-planned vacation for this week, celebrating actually as part of her birthday this week, so that's the reason she's not there. However, we have been in contact with her from her vacation home.
Yeah.
A couple of times, yeah, so she is in fact working.
All right.
And I will answer the earlier question from today.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure the finance director will back me up on this. The number that you saw, that you were talking about with the revised budget, should have said 2014, 2015, because traditionally we've shown 3 years of expenditures, 2 years of revenue.
That may be true. That's the reason I ask. What you're telling us is that we as a community have voted on two budgets with the legal notice having incorrect data. Is that correct?
No, I don't think so.
Well, I mean, it's
either
either
typo. I looked at it.
it's either right or it's wrong, right?
One portion of it is wrong.
Okay.
But you're voting on this year's budget.
You're voting
not
on this year's budget.
2014's
That's right.
budget.
And if you look at the estimated revenues, take a look at those. What do they show? Are they consistent with the estimated expenditures?
Yeah.
They are.
So you guys look at this before it goes out?
I did not see it before.
But they still put your name underneath as being accurate.
Because we trust them.
All right, well, we trust you guys too.
Typos happen.
What's that?
Typos happen, things happen. Okay?
I agree with you, but
sometimes
but
things
my
get in
point
the
is,
paper that
this
we
is
just-
in absence of anything on the ballot that says what we're actually voting for, we're looking at this. Is there any reason for putting the actual budget number on the ballot? Is there any reason why we wouldn't do that?
There's nothing in this document that suggests there was a 5% tax increase coming.
Well, it would beg to differ, so, all right, thank you.
Anyone else wishing to address the board?
Hi, I'm Karen Goldberg. I live at 372 White Birch. I want to start off by saying this is way past my bedtime. And the fact that you guys do this and volunteer to do this on your own free time is like unbelievable to me. I can't imagine how you guys do this, so thank you. I really appreciate it. I really appreciate the thoughtfulness that you put into this, and I really appreciate you going through this with the community over and over and over again. I would like to just talk a little bit about the fact that there's been such a poor turnout from the first one, the second one, but I think that we have woken up. I forgot to vote on the first one. I have to admit, I had a crazy day at work. I had a meeting I'd forgotten about, and I didn't get to vote. I woke up for the second one, but we are very busy people here. I have 3 kids, I work. You know, I don't have to explain to you guys how busy a lot of people are. I don't think that it is people not caring about their kids. I don't think it's the number of people that didn't come out to vote, who had voted for the high school. I think it's just that people get lazy. There's not something exciting like a new high school to go out for. I think that if you give us another chance with a good, reasonable budget that is not going to take deep cuts, there are many of us who are willing to go out and get the vote out for a yes budget. We do not want this to fail again. The reason I'm late to this meeting is because I was at the Adams Orchestra concert, which was fabulous. And I am so happy to be part of this community. I think that if you talk to most of the parents out here, we all feel the same way, but we all get wrapped up in our own lives, and we forget important things like showing up to these things, staying up till 11 o'clock to be at these things. And I just want to ask you guys to give us another chance at a good budget that is not going to really make us regret what we have done, and will set us back many years. So again, thank you, and I appreciate everything you guys do.
Thank you.
Joe Petrowski. I'd like to thank everybody for being here tonight. What bothers me the most is I don't see any parents here. It's very troubling to me. But are you up here? There were times when budgets were being discussed and everything else, and the room was full of parents. It's kind of disappointing. I'd like to thank Mr. Mazza for explaining the surpluses. You know, I came here a few meetings in a row and said how efficiently I think things were running in the town hall, and I knew new hires were under different labor agreements, and people were being retired and positions weren't being refilled. So that was basically what I was saying. You've done a good job. I was one of the irate people years ago that complained about the fund balance being drawn down to nothing, and I'm glad the leadership of this community took the role and, you know, went on a mission and accomplished it. And Madison was mentioned about the hit they took from the state. I wonder, does Madison receive any money from Hammonasset, because of Hammonasset, from the state?
They get pilot money from the state, which was cut this year.
It was cut?
Yeah.
But historically speaking, they've gotten some money. Enrollments keep coming up. There were a couple of years there, Bill, that there were bubbles going through the system. I don't know if you remember that or not. And I don't know if that's interfering with some of these total numbers, the changes, you know, taking that into consideration.
Joe, there's one thing I should mention about Madison. They have an all-volunteer fire department.
Excuse me?
They have an all-volunteer fire department.
Yep.
Okay.
And we help them out, they help us out.
Mutual aid, we sure do, but we help each other out.
Right.
And they have a lower or a smaller population, fewer roads. You know, I didn't feel like engaging the other gentleman because I'll leave it at that. Okay.
I understand. One thing, this special ed keeps coming up. I gotta say something. I've been involved with this for a while. The former superintendent had some experience in special ed, so he kind of set the table for what's taking place today. And thanks again. Good luck, everybody. Thanks for addressing the lights. That was something that few people were getting a little upset about.
Yeah,
but,
I got a couple emails on it.
Okay. Thank you. Good night.
Good night. Anyone else wishing to address the board?
I didn't hear anything.
Is there a motion to adjourn?
I'll move to adjourn.
Second, all in favor? Aye. Thank you all. Yes, tomorrow, let's, Mike, stay on. Tomorrow night, 7:30, the fire department. Just the Board of Finance, and anybody else who wants to come is welcome to come.
Not all the other boards
But not all the other boards are required, but I would like you there, and you and Dr.